Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, and if you can believe it, it's Wednesday already. It's Week 8, and it's time to take a good long look at the rankings. That's right, the running backs and the wide receivers. We're going to talk about some rankings that are different than the ECR and different from each other. Pat Fitzmaurice, our ranking master, is always here for this show, and today's guest is one of my favorite people. You know him from Fantasy Pros because he writes our DFS stuff. He's the one, the only John Hesterman. You can also check his work out at DL Football, and of course, you can follow him on the Twitter machine at John_Hesterman. John, it is great to see you. It's fun to have you here on the show. I know you did DFS shows with me last year, so it's great to have you on the regular pod as well. And I got to press the guest at the top, because that's my job here every single day on the show. And I got to ask you, what do you think we're going to see out of the new look Colts with Sam Ehlinger under center and no longer Matt Ryan?
Hopefully it's a more run-heavy approach. I'm hoping with one of the best running backs in football, we get to see them kind of ground and pound a little bit more and buy the kids some time to get acclimated to the speed of real-life NFL football.
Yes, that would be nice. For all those people who have Jonathan Taylor who hasn't really done much in a month, it would be nice to get back to the ground and pound. So let's do that. Let's ground and pound right now, and let's look at the rankings here at fantasypros.com/rankings. You can always check out the ECR along with all of our other tools there. And we're going to start with a running back that's already very controversial because he had the backfield to himself for 18 hours, it feels like, somewhere around there. It's Michael Carter of the New York Jets. Pat, you've got him ranked at RB24. Our guest, John, has him ranked at RB30. The ECR is closer to you, though, Pat, at RB26. So let's talk about what impact Michael Carter can have this week against the New England Patriots now that he's got to share some of that backfield with James Robinson.
So we saw a similar dynamic last week, Joe, with a running back trade during the week with the 49ers acquiring Christian McCaffrey. And McCaffrey did not play that big a role. Like he played something of a role. And this is a little different because McCaffrey was acquired on a Thursday and the deal for Robinson was announced on a Monday night. So there have been a couple of extra days for Robinson to try to assimilate the playbook and get, on the same page with the rest of his Jets teammates and practices. But still, I don't think we are going to see Robinson play that significant a role. I think it's mostly going to be Carter with this backfield to himself, probably playing about 75% of the snaps. And last year, when he had this gig more or less to himself, he had running back 2 value. And I think that's kind of what he's going to have this week. It's not the easiest matchup in the world. He's going up against a Patriots defense that until last week had not allowed a touchdown to a running back, but then both David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert scored against them in a pretty dreadful game for the Patriots. And look, we know Zach Wilson can't carry this offense by himself. They are going to have to pay lip service to the running game with Michael Carter. I think he's a pretty good play this week.
All right, so John, you've basically got Michael Carter more like a flex play. Is that because you still expect him to catch a fair amount of passes in this contest today?
Yeah, I am expecting him to see probably an uptick in targets. The immediate concern here and why I'm a little lower, I think, than the consensus is the amount of time that the Jets wasted in bringing in James Robinson, like you alluded to, was like 18 hours. It feels like they didn't even have the official diagnosis and they're on the phone trying to find a running back. So we know that they don't want to run him out there 15 times a game. I think over the course of his career, he's averaging around 10 rushes a game. So I do hope it leads to an uptick in targets and we see some of the more value plays that way. He's currently seeing an average of about 3.5 targets per game. I'm hoping that goes up a little bit because, like you said, you can't really trust Zach Wilson to drop back and throw it 40 times a game. So yeah, I think he's a solid flex play. I might be a little bit low, but the speed at which they brought in Robinson just makes me nervous that they want him between the tackles and Carter and kind of that contingency role or that complementary role.
All right, let's move on to the next back here where Pat's got him higher than John. Gus Edwards, who was just plucked right off the waiver wire this week in a lot of leagues. We talked about him on the waiver wire pod. If you missed that, go back and check out all the discussions about all those running backs. But Gus Edwards, RB32. Pat, you've got him as a pretty comfortable flex, it feels like. John's got him at RB38. ECR is at RB31. So, Pat, what are your expectations here for Gus Edwards? This is a very run-heavy attack, but they do have some different guys you can give the ball to. I know Justice Hill had that key fumble. We know Lamar's always going to run himself a fair amount, but what's your confidence level this week in terms of running out Gus Edwards in lineups?
Yeah, I mean, so at running back 32, I wouldn't say he is a slam dunk start. Probably going to be borderline for a lot of people. And as you mentioned, Joe, there are other guys in the mix here. It's kind of a three-pronged backfield, and we saw that with the snap counts last week. It was 23 snaps for Gus Edwards, 20 for Justice Hill, 17 for Kenyon Drake. So only a 36% snap share for Gus Edwards, but he got the ball 16 times, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. Some guys just get the ball on a higher percentage of their snaps. And like if snap share was everything, Jerick McKinnon would have a lot of fantasy value. But he doesn't get a lot of touches. And even though McKinnon is leading the Kansas City Chiefs backfield in snaps, just not a lot of value there when you're not getting the touches on a high percentage of your snaps. I think Gus is going to continue to get the ball on a lot of those snaps where he is playing. He's kind of one-dimensional, though. He's a runner and not a pass catcher, so he's got to do something on the ground to make it worth your while. And probably you're not going to be happy with him if he doesn't get into the end zone. And this is a tougher matchup than he had last week. Like, the Browns have been soft against the run all year. The Buccaneers better against the run for sure, even though they didn't show it against the Panthers last week.
I was going to say, not as good as last year, and certainly not great last week. But that being said, Pat, he had 2 touchdowns also, Gus Edwards. So a lot of the fantasy points did come from the touchdowns. I mean, you take those TDs away, you're down significantly. You're in terms of that 19-point half PPR day that he had. John, is that your concern when it comes to Gus Edwards too? Is that so much of his points came because of those touchdowns? He had 16 carries for 66 yards, only 1 target though.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the touchdowns, and the other is the amount of touches they gave him. Like, we saw what they did with J.K. Dobbins when they brought him back. They eased him back in. They didn't do that with Gus. I mean, they immediately fed him 16 carries. So on the season, you know how many times a running back has had 13 or more carries for the Ravens? Twice. Last week, and Justice Hill back in week 7, he got, in week 4, he got 13 carries. So they don't want to feed someone 15 plus touches. So they're going to keep that 3-pronged committee approach that they've been utilizing, try to keep everybody fresh. I think for his career, Gus Edwards is averaging 9.6 rush attempts per game. Coming back off that knee injury, it wouldn't surprise me if they trot Kenyon Drake out there to, screw us all up all over again.
Good times. That sounds like fun. I'm sure everybody that spent a lot of fab on Gus Edwards is going to be super happy to see that, I'm sure. All right, let's get to the Arizona Cardinals running back situation, because we've got both these guys. And this is fun because James Conner, Pat's got ranked at RB 25. John's got ranked at 31. ECR's got at 36. So you guys are actually kind compared to the ECR on Conner. And obviously a lot of this has to do with injury news. And as more injury news gets updated, obviously we'll keep you updated on our Fantasy Pros News Desk app. But we've also got Eno Benjamin, who Pat has ranked at 34. John's got ranked at 23. And the ECR's got at 23. So Eno's coming off the big week. Conner is ahead for you right now. Is that just because it was his job, and if he's healthy, you're just going back into that well here, especially with DeAndre Hopkins back, Pat? Or do you think that Eno showed enough last week to eat into that workload where maybe both these guys should, move backwards together a little bit in the ECR?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Joe. I think we're going to see something between a 55-45 and 60-40 split. I do still think Conner is going to be the main man, and I do think Conner is going to be the goal line guy. But looked terrific last week. 113 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. And Conner, we know that he is very TD dependent with his value. Like, we saw that last year, except for that period where Chase Edmonds got hurt and Conner was suddenly a do-it-all back. That was 4 games or something, though. That's really not Conner's role. He is a thumper for the most part, and he's only thumped it into the end zone once this year, back in week 1. So without the TDs propping up his value, he hasn't been that great, but he has been averaging 13.6 touches a game. I'm sure the medical ambiguity with him is part of what is holding down his ECR a bit, but the medical people I have heard from this week seem to think he's going to be back from this rib injury this week. So I've still got to put him ahead of Benjamin, but the gap might be closing a little bit.
John, you have Eno right now ahead. Let's say that Connor's a go. How does this affect your ranking of these two RBs?
I would really have to back Benjamin down a little bit. I know he disappointed a lot of people in week 6. I think poop the bed might be a more appropriate terminology, especially for those who ran him out there in a whole bunch of DFS contests. Guilty.
He was very popular. You know what? It's funny. I had him in a bunch, and then the minute I got very lucky with this. Then the minute that the Deion Jackson thing popped up, I switched out all the Eno for Deion because he was even cheaper and allowed me to get a couple other things. And boy, oh boy, was I glad that I did. Derek Brown did not, and that was a fun Sunday afternoon of texting back and forth between us.
Nor did I. So I wish I could have been part of that text chain. We could have just landed back to each other.
We got to get you in that one. Yeah, going forward, that's what we got to do. Go ahead.
So yeah, I do think. Based on the medical ambiguity right now, because didn't I see something about a hip too?
He's got a few
not
things
just ribs,
going
but
on.
Wasn't hip listed?
I guess the point is, all year James Conner had the product, had the touches, but really nothing was converting. But I don't know if that is because the Arizona Cardinal defense without DeAndre Hopkins is just a different defense, or is that just where we're at with James Conner? It's very hard to understand. Or has he been hurt all year and playing through some of these things? There's just a lot to unpack here with the uncertainty. And you mentioned the DFS week we had with Eno Benjamin 2 weeks ago was very bad. Last week, I had downgraded him in my rankings. I'm sure a lot of people did. And then last week he popped off and he had a very good Thursday night game. So he's a bit of an enigma too, which makes this backfield very difficult to start, I think, with any sort of confidence.
Yeah, the one nice thing I will say is the matchup's not horrendous. The Vikings are pretty close to like a neutral matchup against the position. They're not, too stiff to run on, and they give up a little bit of points. So it all comes down to how the split's going to work, and I think we're going to be shuffling these guys back and forth a little bit once we know exactly who's going to be rolled out there.
All right, let's go to a guy that John likes more than Pat. Let's flip the script here a little bit. Let's talk about Jamaal Williams here. Pat's got him ranked at RB 29, but John, you've got him at 22. ECR is a little closer to Pat here at RB 27. Now, John, again, DeAndre Swift uncertainty, I'm sure, baking into this ranking, but let's say we get Swift back. How does that impact your ranking potentially of Jamaal Williams? And if Swift is out again, is Jamaal Williams move up even higher for you potentially?
I've got him kind of potentially slated where I'd have him if Swift was still out. My only thought was to move him back if I had to, if Swift plays. Now, I'm a heavily invested DeAndre Swift manager. I've tweeted about off-season heading into the draft season, TikToks, the whole 9 yards. So the most frustrating thing as a Swift manager right now is the goal line usage that he does not have, because all of it has gone to Jamaal Williams. So even if we see Swift back and he's on some kind of pitch count, the goal line carries are going to be Jamaal Williams, and that has been part of what's propped up his value through the course of the season. We know he's going to get the goal line work.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, this is, as someone else who's got DeAndre Swift in a few leagues, it's certainly been difficult. I think we all thought after that bye, we'd get him back and healthy. And when he didn't, I think that gave a lot of us pause. However, his teammate Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to play. And by the way, if you like Amon-Ra St. Brown stuff, well, I got something for you. I've got an Amon-Ra St. Brown autographed helmet for you. That's right. One of you listening out there might get this. Thanks to our good friends at PristineAuction.com. All you have to do is go drop a 5-star review of the podcast wherever you get your pods. Go to Apple Podcasts especially. Drop a 5-star review. I love when Joe and Pat talk about rankings every single week, and John Hesterman's a great guest. See, there again, I just wrote it for you. That's all you got to do. Go to FantasyPros.com/contest and then enter. Just like that, it can be yours. And if you want some extra little you know what into the contest, I know a guy, well, I really don't. I know how to get you those entries. What you do is you go and you follow us on Fantasy Pros, on the TikTok machine, on the Twitter machine, and on the Instagram machine. All those are extra entries into the contest. So go to FantasyPros.com and go to FantasyPros.com/contest. Go ahead and enter to win that Amon-Ra St. Brown helmet today. And you got 4 entries on me. So go ahead, go win it. All right, let's get to another running back here, James Robinson. See, we've come full circle here. We talked about Michael Carter, then we talked about all the Cardinals guys, and now we're back to the Jets again. So James Robinson, you've got ranked at RB 32 here, John. Pat's at RB 49. He thinks James Robinson needs some more time, obviously, to cook with the playbook. ECR's got him at 39, right in between, which maybe that's more reasonable, I guess, between both of these, because there's a lot of unknown when you have a player who moves from team to team, how they're going to ingratiate themselves in to that locker room right away, pick up the playbook, et cetera, et cetera. So what are your expectations this week for James Robinson, and how comfortable are you starting him?
Honestly, he was part of my morning tinkering when I was doing some rankings, and I actually moved him down just a few spots. But look, the Jets have clearly shown their hand. We kind of discussed that earlier. They want a guy they can get 15-plus touches to, and Carter just being the smaller-framed guy isn't it. Robinson's a little more robust. He's not a whole lot taller, but he's definitely got the bigger body type to take more of that beating between the tackles, which I think is what they're bringing him in for. So I think he's probably going to get a step in and immediately probably get 8 to 12 touches, somewhere in that range, while Carter kind of retains that complementary role, hopefully an uptick in passing. But I'm going to be paying attention because he is someone I tinkered with already this morning.
All right, Pat, I know you've kind of already said your piece, what you think about this backfield, but any other parting shots here for those people who might have Carter and James Robinson trying to decide which one would you start this week?
Oh, definitely Carter. I mean, I think the over-under on touches for Robinson is probably about 6.5 this week. And, and it's not a great matchup against the Patriots. A lot of other guys who are the number 2 running backs on their team I would rather start this week. Antonio Gibson, Khalil Herbert, even A.J. Dillon, Joe, who's pretty much dead in the water for us.
You know what? We got to take an L there, Pat. You and I mean,
yes,
gosh, I don't think there were 2 people more excited about A.J. Dillon than you and me. And it has not gone well. So
it has not.
We just got to take the L there.
No.
I mean, it's got gone well for the Packers collectively, but that's a whole other program. We don't have time for that today. What we do have time for, though, of course, is a little game where Joe's higher than the ECR. And this is usually where Pat likes to stuff me back down and knock me down to size and say, no, Joe, you're wrong. The ECR is right. I have Travis Etienne as a top 10 running back this week. That's right. I'm all in. The James Robinson trade to me is now just a clear sign that Travis Etienne's that guy. He potentially can only get better. I understand the Denver defense is good. I get it. But it's more about the Denver defense and the Denver offense at the same time, because the offense, I think, is going to give some more shots here to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there's an 8-spot difference because he is at, ECR 18 when the day started today. I know he's moving as we speak, but am I right or am I wrong here to like Travis Etienne this much, Pat?
I might be too low on him. I've got him. So I'm right around ECR on him. I might even be a little bit behind. I think I have him at RB19. I've got him at the bottom of this very hard to sort tier that also includes guys like Miles Sanders, Raheem Mostert, DeAndre Swift. So I don't know, maybe I need to move him up higher on this tier, but man, you have to be excited about what the workload is going to look like with only JaMychal Hasty and maybe Snoop Connor as the only other guys in that backfield now. Etienne is just so explosive too. I mean, I've got him, Joe, I've got him on the FantasyPros in-house league, and that was looking like a terrible pick early on. And I've had a couple other guys like that who have gained a lot of value. It was starting with a mediocre Texas Hold'em hand and, having that straight hit the board on the flop. Etienne has been like that. I mean, a guy whose value is not looking that great early on. And now people who drafted him rolled Yahtzee.
Pat, 2 weeks ago, I traded Mark Andrews in a dynasty league and I got back Pitts and Etienne. I'm trying the ultimate buy low. And I'm just hoping that Kyle Pitts gets a quarterback next year, for Christmas. At some point we can get that. Let's see if he does.
Or they fire Arthur Smith, Joe. One or the other.
I think we can only blame Arthur Smith so much. So somebody else has got to throw him the football at the end of the day. But John, what are your thoughts on Travis Etienne? Am I too giddy here after this trade and what I saw last week of the explosiveness Pat was talking about? Should I get checked a little bit here with the ECR?
No, I mean, if you're crazy, I'm going with you. So I'm closer to where you are. I've got him right around 15. His slow roll to being amazing is nothing short of impressive. It's been just fun to watch. And for anybody that follows the snap counts and stuff like that, you could kind of see that it was trending towards him having the, in share of that workload. Barring injury, I don't see why he's not a top 12, top 13 guy rest of the way. And his matchups, by the way, I mean, he's got Denver this week, then he's got Vegas and the Chiefs before their bye. Mm-hmm. and then Tennessee, Dallas, and the Jets in the playoffs. So there's some good stuff along the way for him to really, really kind of slam home. But I do like him this week. I think it's that one big run that he seems to be just blazingly capable of, and he's major weak.
Yeah, and look, we're here to help you guys figure out how to set your lineups, get everything right here where players are ranked. If you need more help too, don't forget about My Playbook, because we got that app. It's free. You download that bad boy. We got the cheat sheets tool as well, and that is free. I know some of our stuff is attached to the premium product, but go try My Playbook anyway. Use the cheat sheets. You get customizable rankings. You can choose your experts and get rest of season ranks. You get weekly ranks. So there's no excuses for not setting the best lineup you practically can. And that's over at fantasypros.com/myplaybook. So don't forget about that either. Let's move on, gentlemen, to the wide receiver room, and we'll start here with T. Higgins, that Pat has ranked as wide receiver 11. Again, not too big of a difference here. Wide receiver 15 for John. ECR losing a little faith in T. Higgins, though. Wide receiver 18. I've seen him on the block in some leagues lately. I know last week Tyler Boyd was just balling out. I don't know who had that on their bingo card. But Pat, let's talk about T. Higgins. You are steadfast here in the love. I'm with you. I understand why, but do you understand where people in the market are starting to get a little gun shy after all the big Chase games and then that big Tyler Boyd game last week?
I sort of do, Joe. And I just want to point out that in my most important home league last week, a 16-team league, I managed to win despite facing Joe Burrow. And a key reason why I was able to do that was because my opponent had Joe Burrow paired with T. Higgins, and I started Tyler Boyd. And
so you're the one. You're that one person that had Tyler Boyd active.
Hey, it's a 16-teamer, man. And
you gotta do what you gotta do, man. I hear you.
Had the Higgins and Boyd point totals been reversed, I would have lost that game. So, sorry to John B, who's probably listening to this show right now, my opponent from last week. And look, right now, Tyler Boyd, because of some of the big plays he's had, is the wide receiver 13 in half-point PPR, while T. Higgins is only the wide receiver 22, although Higgins did leave one game early after only 10 snaps. So that's certainly unexpected, but not completely crazy over a relatively small 7-game sample size. I'm holding true to my original assessments with these Bengals wide receivers, that Chase is a top 3 option every week, that Higgins is like a high-end wide receiver 2, and that Boyd is a wide receiver 3. Look, Joe Burrow is dealing right now.
Sure
that's why Higgins ascends to low-end wide receiver 1 range for me. He has had 2 straight huge games. Burrow is averaging 299.6 passing yards a game this season. There's plenty of love to go around with the Bengals receivers, put it that way. And they're playing a Browns defense that ranks 28th in DVOA against the pass. They've got the 8th lowest pressure rates, so Burrow is probably going to be given time to find his receivers downfield. And as much draft capital as the Browns have sunk into the cornerback position with Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams and Greg Newsome, it has not gone well. Those guys have been pretty bad this year. I don't think they're going to be able to cover any of these wide receivers. So start Higgins with confidence. Last week it was Boyd's turn, and it seems like every week it's Jamar Chase's turn. Higgins' turn is going to come up here real soon, quite possibly this week.
All right, John. So last week, was that just potentially that Tyler Boyd one-off? We're going right back to the confidence level of Higgins, or do you think people need to build into that flex spot a little bit more boom if you're rolling Higgins out again this week?
Yeah, you've got to expect some boom play. And I do think in this case, ECR probably owes us an explanation on the ranking, because I think this isn't me versus Pat. This is like us versus ECR at this point. And I kind of get it. I don't know what the deal is. Is Higgins contractually obligated for 2022 to be this close to a touchdown in almost every game?
Seems like it, yeah.
It
seems like that's the running game. Well, I think that's the frustration of why people are, like I said, I've been several leagues where he is straight up on the trade block in the last couple of weeks. And I understand why it's frustration, but Pat's kind of saying, hey, let's not forget about the rankings going into the season and the pedigree. And also knowing that Chase was always going to be that guy and the ceiling was always going to be capped with Higgins. But when Boyd has that big game, I get the frustration that's out there.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of it. There is some frustration. I've got him in a few dynasty leagues, and him having a couple of those touchdowns that were so close would have made the difference between those weeks. So I kind of get it, but it's Joe Burrow who, like you said, is dealing. It takes one or two of these big plays that they're capable of, and he's made his week, and the blow up is soon.
All right, New England in a little bit of a quarterback conundrum. Jakobi Meyers, though, Pat has ranked at our wide receiver 22. John has him at wide receiver 28. ECR right in between you guys, pretty much at wide receiver 26. Now, Pat, Meyers has been pretty solid this year, but most of the solid performances were with Bailey Zappi. So is this really a ranking depending on who you think is quarterback this week? Or do you think that Jakobi Meyers has kind of earned this spot regardless of who's under center?
I kind of think he's earned this spot because the quarterback thing, it's certainly hard to base a ranking of him based on that because we have no idea what Bill Belichick is doing with his quarterbacks right now. That is
I don't think he knows.
A fascinating storyline. So I'm not used to being above consensus on Jakobi Meyers. I've pretty consistently been below consensus on him most weeks. And my hang up with Meyers in the past was that he didn't score many touchdowns and did not make a lot of big plays. So you were basically just getting empty PPR calories out of Jakobi Meyers. But now, all of a sudden, he's got a career high average depth of target, 11.5 yards. They're throwing to him deeper downfield. He's averaging 13.7 yards per catch and a career high 10.8 yards per catch. That's per target, which is a really impressive number, actually. So like Meyers has turned into a high quality wide receiver. Right now, he's the wide receiver 18 in half-point PPR points per game. And lining up in the slot on about half his snaps, he is going to mostly avoid the coverage of the Jets' excellent outside cornerback pair of Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, and run more of his routes against the other Michael Carter on the Jets, who is giving up a 73% completion rate and 1.28 yards per route into his coverage. That's the guy you want to be facing if you're a wide receiver playing the Jets, and Meyers is going to run most of his routes against Carter.
Literally while you were talking, Pat, I got an update on my Playbook app here on my phone, which says Patriots head coach Bill Belichick once again declined to name a starting quarterback on Wednesday. So we are armed with nothing here. But John Hesterman, your thoughts on Jakobi Meyers working out of that slot? Is that enough for you to get excited about starting him this week?
Yeah, I think he's a solid flex play. I'm a little nervous because Bailey Zappi is who he's done most of his damage with. But this season so far, he's leading that receiving core in snap percentage. He's played over 80% of the snaps in each of the last 3 games. He's averaging the high PPR points scored per snap rate of that receiving core. He has cemented himself as being kind of their go-to read and their option. And I like seeing them getting him out in more plays where he can make more of a play. Because that, like Pat said, that's one of the things that was kind of frustrating about him is he'd get a short yardage catch and then down he went. So I am liking the usage so far. I'd feel a lot more comfortable. I'd probably move him up a little bit if it was named Zappi as the starter. But yeah, he's a solid flex play this week.
All right, let's move on to the next guy here that Pat has higher than John. George Pickens, wide receiver 28. John's not having it. Wide receiver 40, ECR is at 32. So, Pat, I don't know if this is an Eagles-based matchup here that's got John a little panicked. In fact, maybe I should go to John first because, this is a big George Pickens, pro-George Pickens room, I believe, here. So, John, why so low? Is it because of the Eagles' defense that you're concerned with? Or is it just a fact of, still that Pittsburgh Steelers offense being less than thrilling?
That's a big part of it. The Eagles defense is a big part of it. He's played well the last couple of games in softer matchups. And admittedly, this is another one that I tinkered with a little bit this morning. So he's going to come up a little bit for me. But over his last 4 games, he's still playing fewer snaps than Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. He's topped 80% snap share once. The Eagles defense is pretty solid. They're allowing the 12th fewest points to the position. If he didn't have that touchdown last week, he would have been below the 10 half-point PPR scoring for the 5th time this season. So I like the way he's progressing as a rookie. I like that they're getting him more involved as the season goes on. In a more difficult matchup and still playing fewer of the snaps, I'm still a little hesitant to crown him a whole lot higher.
All right, so Pickens did have his first touchdown of the year. So John was talking about moving him up a little bit, but not too much. After all of that, Pat, do you want to move him back down the ranking a little bit?
No. Yeah.
There we go. Let's go,
That's what
baby.
I'm talking about.
Now the show's begun.
Let's go.
Yeah, so you mentioned that first touchdown, Joe. It was on a nice end zone fade. The football nerds hate the end zone fade, but if you're going to throw that end zone fade, throw it to a tall guy who's really acrobatic and can make great catches, and Pickens is that. Like, I have been consistently 4 to 8 spots higher than consensus on my ranking of Pickens this season, and I want to continue to be. Like, I think this guy is so awesome, a superstar in the making. He runs crisp routes. He's got terrific hands. He's shown a knack for the acrobatic catch. And he has this level of physicality that I did not realize he had when I used to watch him at Georgia. Like, he relishes contact. Like, he is a bad man. And
he's a tough kid.
So averaging 68.3 yards a game over his last 4. He's had exactly 6 catches in 3 of his last 4 games. That role is increasing. I mean, John mentioned that he's not playing as many snaps as Claypool and Deontay, but he's still playing a lot of snaps. He's a fixture in 3 receiver sets, and they're using a lot of 3 receiver sets. The Eagles do have a really good pair of outside cornerbacks with Darius Slay and James Bradbury. I don't care. Like, Pickens is good. I want to start him. When in doubt, I'm starting Pickens.
All right, let's talk about Brandon Aiyuk. Reminds me of a Frank Sinatra song, All or Nothing at All. Brandon Aiyuk, last couple of weeks has been good, though. Pat's got him at wide receiver 31, but John, you've got him at 23. ECR is at 28. So now that Christian McCaffrey obviously has another week under his belt here, do you think that that Aiyuk continues to be somebody that they continue to focus on, and maybe Debo is the guy that kind of falls by the wayside a little bit in terms of some of this target share?
So I do think the defensive attention is going to be a lot more difficult for teams approaching them. If you've got to try to stop Debo, you've got to try to stop Christian McCaffrey, you've got to try to stop Kittle, and that leaves Aiyuk kind of hopefully for some of those bigger plays, softer coverage, if you're trying to shut down 1 or 2 or 3 of those guys. So I am hoping that this does, and obviously the projection shows that this leads to some of the bigger play opportunities that we used to remember Aiyuk for. Like, that used to be kind of the big part of his game, was these big, long, explosive, athletic plays, and we haven't seen as much of that over the last couple of weeks. He's played really, really well. 80-plus receiving yards in both games. He had 2 touchdowns in the one game, double-digit fantasy points, and during that same stretch, Jimmy G has thrown 30 or more times in those games. So I'm liking this. I'm liking seeing the offense open up a little bit more, him get more comfortable and throw the ball a little bit more. And I do think he's one of the quiet beneficiaries of them adding Christian McCaffrey to this team.
Now, I tend to agree with you there, John. Pat, we're used to Brandon Aiyuk not really being startable until the last 6 weeks of the season. That's typically his MO the last 2 years. But maybe, just maybe here, we're sitting here in week 8 and he becomes a guy we could start without really too much concern. Are you starting to feel that San Francisco's offense is starting to evolve, that maybe Aiyuk is somebody you could feel really good about starting every week now?
I do feel good about Aiyuk, and I have been above consensus on him most weeks, and I don't like being in the position of trying to talk people out of starting Brandon Aiyuk, and I'm really not going to do that, but I will state my concerns, Joe. So one, I'm going to assume that Debo Samuel plays here. He's got a little bit of a hamstring issue. If he doesn't play, then I will be closer to where John is on Aiyuk.
Sure.
But one of the things that concerns me slightly is the arrival of CMC and CMC possibly siphoning away a few targets. Although I do think probably it nets out to even, or maybe even in Aiyuk's favor, because I think CMC, they're going to score more touchdowns with McCaffrey around. And, Aiyuk's probably going to get a couple of those extra TDs. So the bigger concern for me is George Kittle and his increased route participation and his increased targets in the last couple of weeks. And part of that is because I think the 49ers are feeling better about where they are with their offensive line. And they got Trent Williams back. He had missed a couple weeks with an injury. They got him back last week. And over the last 2 weeks, we've seen Kittle not blocking nearly as much. He had 15 targets in the first 3 games he played this year. He's got 19 targets in the last 2. So, like, Kittle is becoming much more of a factor in this passing game. I think that chips away a little bit at Debo and Aiyuk's targets. So, man, like, I don't hate playing Aiyuk. I will be playing him in a couple of leagues myself this week. I'm just not quite as bullish on him this week because of the increased Kittle usage of late.
All right, let's get to Michael Gallup here. You've got him, John, at wide receiver 32. Pat's got him at wide receiver 39. ECR's at 31. Now, clearly, last week, everybody had high expectations. Dak was back. The Lions were there. And he put a big fat 0 up, which means that obviously he's the worst wide receiver ever, and he's never going to do anything. That's typically what people think after those things go wrong. So, John, you're kind of bringing everybody back, sobering them up and saying Michael Gallup is still somebody you should consider useful. What are your expectations for him here in this game against the Bears this week?
Yeah, it's a good matchup. It's a good secondary. Their secondary is actually a whole lot better than their run defense, that's for sure. But I will say Gallup was the subject of probably 3/4 of the do I drop him for player X questions that I got 100%. This week. I mean,
me too. On the live stream on Tuesday afternoon, there was a lot of Gallup discussion. And yeah, I understand why.
It's been everywhere. Yeah. So I'm going to go Aaron Rodgers here and tell everybody just to relax. Okay, just chill out.
I don't know. He told us to relax, and then he went and laid a turd in Washington. So I don't know if that's the best metaphor you want to use here.
Yeah, not sure if he's believable anymore.
Yeah.
Gallup's just a few games back from that ACL. The Cowboys are monitoring his reps. He's been averaging around 70% snap share the last couple of weeks. Dak is back. That's a good thing. And when Dak and Gallup are on the field, he's typically averaging about 6.5 to 6.8 targets per game. So we are going to see both of those guys kind of ramp back up together, which I think is good. The Bears defense, they are going to be looking at trying to slow down CeeDee Lamb. And the Bears' production to the team's secondary receivers so far this season is it's painting a picture. In week 1, it wasn't Deebo Samuel that led him in yards. It was Juwan Jennings. In week 2, it wasn't Allen Lazard. It was Sammy Watkins. Week 3, Chris Moore led the Texans. Justin Jefferson did his thing against them in week 5, but last week it was Devontae Parker that had more yards than Jakobi Meyers. So the secondary receiver is facing the softer coverage. So I do think this is a really good spot for Gallup to have that get-right game and pop back up a little bit.
Pat, do you see a get-right game potentially from Michael Gallup in Week 8?
I don't. He's had 8 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown in 4 games so far. Just not even really usable production. And granted, 3 of those games were with Cooper Rush at quarterback, but then Dak comes back last week, and with a juicy matchup against the Lions, Gallup gets blanked. No catches, only 2 targets. And right now he's playing behind Noah Brown. Like, he's not even the second receiver for the Cowboys. He's the third receiver. I don't know if that's going to automatically change when they feel a little bit more comfortable about his fitness level coming off this knee injury. Because, like, Noah Brown is a really good blocker, and he's actually a pretty good pass catcher too. Like, he might just be the number 2 wide receiver on the Cowboys now. And I don't know. I mean, Gallup is going to have his moments, but, like, do I trust him in my starting lineup? I kind of don't think I do.
That's fair. Look, I think it's definitely fair. I know there's some bye weeks right now where you're missing a few key wide receivers, and you might have to start Gallup. So hopefully it ends up being John's story and not Pat's here for you that have to do that. Let's go to Romeo Doubs here. Speaking of the Packers before, John, you've got him at wide receiver 35. Pat's got him at 45. ECR splitting the difference at wide receiver 39. So, John, patience is running thin right now. For many people when it comes to this Green Bay Packers offense. So why are you still being patient here with Romeo Doubs in this matchup against Buffalo?
Can I start by saying it's really nerve-wracking to see that I'm that much different in rankings for the Packers fan? I mean, I'm a little nervous to see the disparity there. It's self-loathing
you're seeing. Pat's 45 wide receiver ranking is clearly self-loathing here. I mean, that's what we're getting.
I'll acknowledge the self-loathing, Joe.
I mean, even if it was 40, but no, he's like, no, 5 more spots. That's not quite enough.
40, I probably wouldn't have questioned it at 40, but 45, I'm like, ooh, this is a little nerve-wracking coming into this. So yeah, Doubs really hasn't had that breakout game yet. Not especially after the preseason heroics and the second coming of Devontae and all that kind of fun stuff. But he is playing a lot more. He's second in the receiving core in snap percentage, running at 78.6%. It jumps to 87.1% on third downs. So on those high value targets, he's out there for most of those. In 77% in red zone situations as well. Rodgers has a 92.8 passer rating when he's targeting Doubs, so they're starting to build something there that does work when he's targeted. I just saw a thing today. The matchup's not great, but Tre'Davious, sorry about that. Tre'Davious,
easy for you to say,
has already been ruled out this week, so I think he's probably going to spend some time matched up against Ron Johnson, who's allowing, I think, 10.2 yards per reception in this coverage and like a 66% catch rate. So if there's a game where he might outperform expectations a little bit, this one's a little more scary due to the defense, but he might have the better role on the field for production than Allen Lazard does this week.
Yeah, especially with Lazard being banged up, still uncertainty. In fact, this is weird. People are going to think that Joe's making this up. He's a moron, blah, blah, blah. Literally, you said Lazard, and my playbook just popped up. Lazard was sidelined at Packers practice again on Wednesday. So there you go. See, this is why I've got the app, everybody. You see, it's literally listening to you. See, the robots are listening. They know what you need. Yep. That was actually kind of creepy. We're too close to Halloween for that. Romeo Doubs, obviously, Pat, you know my concerns of what I think of the Green Bay Packers offense now after last week. I'm completely done. I was all in. I was ready to give them that break. Now you're going to Buffalo. I'm worried about them being able to move the chains at all, to be honest with you, in this game. I really am. And that makes Doubs a guy that I just can't start.
Yeah, and the recent performances by Doubs, wherefore art thou, Romeo? I mean, seven catches and 50 yards over his last 3 games. 0 catches on 4 targets last week against Washington, and he just stunk in that game. As someone who suffered through that, a Packers fan, he was not good. He's averaging 5.6 yards per target this season. Like, that's just awful. And yes, I will move him up a few spots if Lazard has to be out this week. It also wouldn't shock me if the Packers did acquire a wide receiver in a trade this week. And, unless Brian Gutekunst is, completely incompetent, which, I kind of think he is, but let's not talk about that. He has to get someone in a trade because they are just the cupboard is so bare at wide receiver. It's ridiculous. And I'm a little concerned about the matchup. I mean, John mentioned that, no Tre'Davious White being around, but, he kind of hasn't been around as it is, and they're still, giving up the 8th fewest yards to wide receivers so far this season. But, I have no interest in playing Doubs this week.
Fun fact, wherefore art thou actually means why. Did you guys know that? In full Shakespeare lore.
Really?
So she says, why are you? Wherefore art thou, Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, and I will no longer be a Capulet. What she's saying is, why? Why are you a Romeo? If you weren't, we could be in love. See that? And obviously, I have no love for Romeo Doubs, so it still works. I just want everybody to know it still works, the metaphor, regardless. All right, let's go to, after that little fun lesson. See, you listen to the Fantasy Pro Show, you get a little smarter every day. I've got Tyler Lockett, higher than the ECR. This is a chance for the boys to shoot me down or pump me up. We shall see. Tyler Lockett, I've got a 13. I'm looking forward to the Geno Smith show. All elite Geno Smith continuing to do what he does, despite anyone's possible grading of Geno Smith going into the season. But here we are. DK Metcalf is going to be out for this game. And I know some people say, well, that hurts him, but I just want to see more volume go to Tyler Lockett. I think he's going to get it. And with some of the wide receivers we're missing, I feel better about Lockett in my rankings than a lot of other guys. I've got him at 13, ECR's at 17. John, am I right, or is ECR right?
Well, I'm in between the two of you. So this could really easily be translated by Pete Carroll as saying, all right, we have an elite wide receiver that's out. You know what we have to do? We have to run the ball more. And that's my biggest concern, is that they lean even more so on that game. I do like the fact that Lockett is going to be that alpha read. He's going to be that first read. I don't expect him to get all of the vacated DK targets, but he will be the unquestionable first read for Geno, and that is good. So I'm kind of splitting the difference between you. I've got him at wide receiver 15.
All right, Pat, your thoughts here. Am I right or wrong about Tyler Lockett?
Good question, Joe. That remains to be seen. I mean, I've kind of got Lockett at the bottom of this tier from like wide receiver 15 to wide receiver 20, and just sticking him towards the bottom was sort of arbitrary. As John said, I expect maybe a slight target bump for him, but not a target windfall. We're probably going to see some of the vacated DK targets go to Marquise Goodwin, probably some to the wide array of tight ends the Seahawks use. Noah Fant, Will Dissly, Colby Parkinson, Jimmy Graham, Pete Metzelaars, all those guys. They're bound to get a few of those targets.
I know you made one of those names up.
Well, Pete Metzelaars, I mean, I remember him very well in the Buffalo Bills days.
What,
88 was he? I'm trying to remember what number
wasn't
he was.
Metzelaars also on the Seahawks? Or am I thinking, did they have John Metzelar? Anyway,
never mind. They had a Metzelaars at some point. Everybody's got to get a good Metzelaars once a day.
That's right.
Exactly. So I do expect that those vacated DK targets are probably going to get spread around to a number of different guys, but maybe we see a couple extra go to Lockett.
All right, let's close things out here with our listener mailbag, our little 3 and out. And of course, these questions come from our Discord channel at fantasypros.com/chat, free to join. But if you go premium at fantasypros.com/offers, like I keep telling you to do, you get all the tools. It's 6 free months of our premium product, and you get access to our AMAs, our stages, and our touchdown call contest, where we're giving away free jerseys and things like that too. So again, free stuff, more knowledge, what's not to like, go join our Discord. This first one is from John from Pat's League. Joe, how the hell did Pat know to start Tyler Boyd against me last week? Does he have some sort of crystal ball? Pat, your thoughts?
Yes, actually, no. In a 16-teamer, I was kind of up against it. I think my only other option would have been Michael Carter. So yeah, I had to start Tyler Boyd.
All right, let's get to some real ones here. We've got one from Steel Dan. Hey Joe, would you drop Pitts for Higbee at this point? People have lost all patience here. Hesterman, are you ready to make that move? Is it time to just keep winning games? Because it kind of feels like it is.
In redraft leagues, obviously, this is a more serious question. Like Dynasty, it's not happening. It's a redraft
league. We're not talking Dynasty. We're dropping Pitts. That's crazy talk.
But I've got Pitts in a league I'm in with James Coe. And I thought I snagged this guy. I was so happy. It was my first redraft share of Pitts that I had this year, and I am pissed. I mean, that's just
no one's happy. There's not one person that has Pitts that's happy right now.
No, and basically, essentially, what the question is do you want to drop the current tight end 21 for the current tight end 12? And at this point, like if you're trying to make a run, if you have a shot at the playoffs, I think you have to chase the points. I wouldn't be happy about it.
I mean, even if you don't have a shot right now, you got to stay relevant, right? I mean, is this kind of just the move right now?
No, if I could sit him and drop something else that has less upside to acquire a tight end, I would rather do that. But yeah, you've got to, at the very least, you've got to sit him.
Pat, your thought on this?
Yeah. So my counterpoint here is that Higbee is averaging 5.7 catches, 49.5 yards per game, 5.9 yards per target, 8.7 yards per catch. He's like another one of the low-calorie PPR guys. So the only way to me that I would do this, drop Pitts for Higbee, is if I were in really good shape and loved everything else about my team in a full-point PPR league and just wanted to lock in 7-8 sure points a week from the tight end position, then go ahead and do Higbee. But if you're trying to win a championship, as we all are, aim for that upside, man. And maybe a lot of people think the upside is no longer existent. But I mean, Arthur Smith was the head coach last year, and Pitts had 1,000-yard season. Granted, maybe the difference between Matt Ryan and Marcus Mariota is just too great. And we saw the Falcons fall into a 3-score hole last week and continue to stick by their run-heavy ways.
And they didn't throw the ball. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, if that didn't happen then I don't know. I got nothing. Until Desmond Ridder takes over.
How many pass attempts was it? Was it 17 or 21?
God, I know.
It was
abysmally low.
That number.
But look, here's the ceiling is still there.
Until Ridder takes over, it doesn't matter. Like, if Ridder takes over, you can get him to unlock. Because the one thing I'll say about Ridder, watching him play for a couple of years in Cincinnati, is he's pretty good in terms of looking for certain guys, hitting them with the football. He's a good precision passer. He's still got a lot of things that, you could say he has to grow into if an NFL quarterback is going to be what he becomes. But I have more confidence in him getting Kyle Pitts the football than Marcus Mariota, period, end of story.
And I think Kyle Pitts is we're trying to win championships. I still think that ceiling exists for Kyle Pitts. Unless you're in a certain position where you are just immensely strong at other positions, I think you need to go for it and roll with Pitts.
Important conversation. Let's go to the mighty Boosh here. Last one. PPR was offered Alvin Kamara and Waddle for Christian McCaffrey. You want to deal away McCaffrey for these two pieces, Pat, or are you going to keep CMC?
Nope, keeping CMC. I think he's the single most valuable asset in 1 QB leagues now. And I'm also terrified of what's going to happen to Kamara when Jameis Winston comes back at quarterback and stops throwing to him.
Yeah. By the way, Justin Jefferson just called and said he'd like to have a word with you because he's the real 1-1. John Hesterman, you're not moving CMC for this, are you?
No. I mean, the Waddle throw in there does make it somewhat tempting. He's currently the wide receiver 7 on the season, so there is that. But no, I'm keeping CMC. You've got wide receiver production and RB production all tidied up into one pretty little package. So.
There you go. The mighty Boosh. Don't make this deal. Keep CMC. All right. You want to follow John Hesterman over on Twitter at John_Hesterman. Go check out all his great work here. Fantasy Pros at FantasyPros.com. Writing the DFS stuff every single week. And of course, the Dynasty League stuff at DL Football. John, always great to have you on the show. Don't forget, go win that Amon-Ra St. Brown autographed helmet from Pristine Auction over at FantasyPros.com/contest. And download the My Playbook app so it can give you all the amazing updates as you say people's names out loud, because that was pretty unbelievable and intense today. And again, people say, oh, you're trying to sell that. I'm telling you right now, I'm sitting here and it's going off in front of me and I see these names and it's glorious. And that's why I have the app. So you go get it too and go use the free features like the cheat sheets and many other amazing tools as that. So that'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For John Hesterman and Pat Fitzmaurice, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.